So picture this. Classrooms buzzing across Tamil Nadu. It's the start of the academic year, right? New notebooks, students eager, teachers ready. But hanging over all of this is this massive financial standoff. It's like a bureaucratic tug of war at the highest level, and it's seriously threatening their education.
Yeah, it really feels incredibly tense. You've got the Tamil Nadu government making this urgent plea saying, look, we need these education funds. They were promised, and they really, really need them now. But while they're hitting this wall, this delay, and now the Supreme Court's involved, but they've essentially just hit pause. It's
Right.
affecting millions.
Exactly. The players are pretty clear, aren't they? You have the Tamil Nadu state government, the central government up in Delhi, and now, right in the spotlight, the Supreme Court. And like you said, the stakes, they're just huge. We're not just talking numbers here. It's the actual educational future, the day-to-day financial stability for, what, over 43 lakh students?
Yeah, 43.9 lakh students, plus 2.2 lakh teachers, and then over 32,000 school staff, all of them starting this new school year with this huge question mark hanging over everything.
It really feels like one of those moments where, the big wheels of government policy and politics are just grinding against the reality people are facing on the ground, a real clash.
It definitely is a critical point where policy, politics, and the human cost all intersect.
Okay, so let's really dive into this, try and untangle it. Our mission here is to understand the policies that are clashing, the politics simmering underneath, and why this fight over money matters so much, not just to the people directly involved in Tamil Nadu, but maybe, to the bigger picture of how things work in India. So where does it start? Really kicks off with this big program, the Samagra Shiksha Scheme.
Yes, the Samagra Shiksha Scheme, or SSS, that's kind of the bedrock of this whole dispute. It's a major centrally sponsored program designed to cover education pretty comprehensively across India. We're talking everything from preschool all the way up through class 12. It's huge in scope.
And its goal is pretty fundamental, isn't it? Making sure every kid gets access to quality education. It's tied into the Right to Education Act, the RTE Act, the promise of free schooling. SSS is supposed to be the funding mechanism for essentials like teacher salaries, keeping school buildings running, getting teaching materials, the actual stuff needed for learning.
Precisely. And the numbers are specific here. For this financial year, 2024-25, the Ministry of Education's Project Approval Board, that's the PAB, they greenlight these things. They actually approved a pretty hefty sum for Tamil Nadu under SSS. It was 3,585.99 crore.
Okay, 3,500 crore approved. And how does that usually break down?
Well, the standard split for most states is 60% from the center, 40% from the state. So based on that formula, the center's share for Tamil Nadu, the bit everyone's fighting over now, comes out to 2,151.59 crore. That specific amount. That's the money at the heart of this legal battle.
Right. So the approval's there on paper. The school year started. The need is obviously there. But then we hit the main problem. Tamil Nadu says there's a complete fund freeze. They're stating very clearly that none of that central money, that 2,151 crore, is actually coming through.
That's the absolute core of their case. And according to Tamil Nadu, the reason the center is supposedly giving for holding back, well, it's very specific. And from the state's point of view, deeply problematic. The center is apparently tying the release of these SSS funds to two other things. First, Tamil Nadu agreeing to implement the National Education Policy 2020, the NEP. And second, signing a formal agreement, an MU, for something called the PM SHRI Schools Scheme. So the way Tamil Nadu interprets the center's message is basically no NEP, no SSS money. Pretty blunt.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredibly direct if that's the stance. And Tamil Nadu's reaction, it's been just as strong, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. They've used some really strong language, calling the withholding of funds unconstitutional, illegal, arbitrary, and unreasonable. Their whole argument pivots on what the SSS is actually for. They say, look, SSS is its own thing, set up to make the Right to Education Act work, an act passed by Parliament, mind you.
Right, a legal mandate.
Exactly. So funds meant to fulfill that legal promise of free education shouldn't be conditional on adopting totally separate policies like the NEP or joining another scheme like PM SHRI. That's their core argument. It raises that fundamental question, are these central schemes about partnership and funding legal requirements? Or are they leverage for pushing policy?
And that's what pushed them to the Supreme Court.
That's precisely it. They're asking the court for that 2,151.59 crore principal amount. Plus, interestingly, they're also claiming interest on it because of the delay. So the total figure they're asking for is slightly higher, 2,291.30 crore.
Taking it to the Supreme Court using Article 131, It really signals how serious this is. For anyone listening, Article 131 is basically the constitutional mechanism for states to sort out major disputes directly with the central government at the highest court. It's designed for exactly these kinds of conflicts.
It is, yeah. It underlines that this is a federal dispute, a state versus center issue. And in their lawsuit, Tamil Nadu's demands are crystal clear. 1, make the center release the SSS funds now. 2, tell the center explicitly that they cannot link these funds to whether or not Tamil Nadu adopts the NEP or signs the PM SHRI agreement.
And their argument rests on that concurrent list point.
Yes, they keep coming back to that. Education is on the concurrent list. Both center and states have power. So Tamil Nadu argues forcing policy adoption using money feels like the center overstepping its bounds, kind of violating that spirit of working together, cooperative federalism.
Okay, so that brings us to that day in court, June 9th, 2025. Tamil Nadu's lawyers are there, really pushing for an urgent hearing.
Yeah, and they laid out why it was so urgent. It wasn't abstract. They pointed to the numbers again. 43.9 lakh students, 2.2 lakh teachers, 32,000 staff directly hit. They highlighted a really critical point, the 25% reservation under the RTE Act. For kids from poorer backgrounds, that was stalling because the money wasn't there.
So kids literally couldn't get admitted under a legal provision because of this.
That was the claim, yes. And they stressed, look, the school year already started on June 3rd. The need isn't coming. It's here right now.
Seems pretty compelling. But the reaction from the justices, Prashant Kumar Mishra and Manmohan, was a bit different.
It was. They basically questioned the timing of the urgency. They pointed out that the actual case was filed back in May 2025. So their question was kind of, well, if it was so critical because the school year was starting, why wait until June 9th to ask for an urgent hearing? Why not push harder right after filing in May?
Okay, so they were focused on the procedure, the timing of the request itself.
That seemed to be their perspective on that particular day's request for urgency. And despite the arguments about the impact on students and schools, the court ultimately said, no, we're not granting an immediate urgent hearing right now. They decided to postpone the case until after their partial working days, which basically means after the court's summer vacation. So everything stays frozen, decision delayed.
And this whole delay, this whole situation, it just puts a massive spotlight on that deeper clash, doesn't it? The center pushing its National Education Policy 2020 and Tamil Nadu digging in its heels over state autonomy, especially around language.
Absolutely. The NEP 2020, it's meant to be this big transformative plan for education across India, modernizing things. But it's run into resistance, particularly in states like Tamil Nadu that have very strong regional identities and their own established ways of doing things in education. And Tamil Nadu's been maybe the most vocal opponent.
And their main sticking point with NEP, it really comes down to language, doesn't it? That three-language formula.
That's a huge part of it, yes. The NEP suggests this formula, typically Hindi, English, and a regional language in non-Hindi states. But Tamil Nadu has this long, very significant history of resisting what they see as Hindi imposition. They've successfully run a two-language policy, Tamil and English, for ages. So they view the NEP's formula, especially the Hindi part, not just as education policy, but as a potential cultural and linguistic imposition. It touches a raw nerve there.
And the PM SHRI Schools Scheme gets caught up in that same dynamic.
Exactly. The center might frame PM SHRI as creating model schools showcasing NEP, but Tamil Nadu seems to view it as, well, a Trojan horse. A way to kind of force NEP adoption indirectly by tying funding or participation in this other scheme to it, bypassing their direct objections, essentially.
Now, the center's justification, as Tamil Nadu reports it, is that SSS itself was sort of realigned with NEP back in 2021.
Right. That seems to be the argument, that when SSS was extended, it was done so under the NEP framework, so the funds are now intrinsically linked. That might be their position.
But Tamil Nadu just isn't buying that at all.
Not at all. They're calling it coercive tactics, a violation of cooperative federalism. They argue, look, we're a federation, education is concurrent. The center should support us in fulfilling existing laws like the RTE Act, not hold essential money hostage to force compliance with a new policy we fundamentally disagree with.
There was that analogy going around.
Yeah, the one about telling a kid you won't give them their agreed upon lunch money, which they need. It's basic. Tied to their right to eat, like SSS is tied to the RTE Act, unless they also agree to do some totally unrelated extra chores, like mowing the lawn or cleaning the garage, things they never agreed to. Tamil Nadu feels SSS funds are their rightful lunch money based on the RTE deal.
And NEP compliance is the unfair extra chore being forced on them.
That's the feeling they're conveying, yeah. It captures that sense of unfair pressure. But beneath all this legal back and forth, the policy debates. We absolutely cannot forget who's actually stuck in the middle. It's the students, the teachers, the school staff in Tamil Nadu. They're the real victims here.
Totally. I mean, 43.9 lakh students, that's just a staggering number. Their education, their resources, the quality of teaching they get, it's all potentially on the line. And then you have the 2.2 lakh teachers, 32,000 staff. Their livelihoods, their ability to do their jobs effectively, it's all under immense strain.
And let's think concretely about what that means. If SSS funds don't flow, schools might struggle to pay teachers on time. Imagine the morale hit, the potential disruption. Basic stuff like keeping the lights on, fixing leaky roofs, ensuring clean water, working toilets, that all costs money.
Yeah, maintenance often relies on these flexible funds.
Exactly. And maybe the most concerning part is that impact on the RTE Act's 25% reservation. If admissions for disadvantaged kids stall because the supporting funds aren't there, I mean, that directly undermines a key social justice aspect of the education law. These aren't just budget line items. They affect kids' lives daily.
And it puts massive pressure on Tamil Nadu's own budget, too, right? They said they'd try to cover the gap.
They did indicate they'd try, using their own state resources for now. But that's got to be incredibly tough. It stretches their finances really thin. You know, money that might have gone to healthcare or roads or other social programs might have to be diverted just to keep schools running. It creates painful choices.
And this is why this matters to everyone listening, even outside Tamil Nadu. It's not just some regional dispute. It shows how these high-level fights over funding and policy can directly harm education quality on the ground. It affects the future of a whole generation in a major state. When school funding gets tangled up like this, it's a problem for everyone.
And you can definitely see this fitting into that larger conversation about how the center and states interact in India, especially on subjects like education where they share power, that concurrent list idea. It's meant to be cooperative, but disputes like this show how easily it can turn into a confrontation, especially if one side feels the other is using money as a weapon to influence policy.
And Tamil Nadu, especially this DMK government, they've been really consistent and loud about pushing back against NEP and defending state autonomy, haven't they? This isn't coming out of nowhere.
No, not at all. It builds on a history of policy clashes and a very strong sense of states' rights, particularly around education and language. You hear it from figures like the DMK MP Kamizachi Thangapandian, who called the center's alleged conditions unconstitutional executive overreach.
The argument being that the center's executive actions are trying to override a law from Parliament, the RTE Act.
That seems to be a key legal point, yes.
Correct.
Using funding tied to executive policies, NEP, PM SHRI, to effectively sidestep the defining implications of a parliamentary law, RTE Act. It's about who holds the power, the legislature or the executive, and how funding is used. And we've even seen echoes of this in other courts, right? Like that Madras High Court case linking RTD admissions to the PM SHRI MOU. It shows this isn't just one isolated Supreme Court case, it's filtering down.
So looking ahead, that Supreme Court hearing, whenever it actually happens after the break, is just incredibly critical, a real turning point, potentially.
It absolutely is. The outcomes could be huge. If the court sides with Tamil Nadu, wow, that could set a major precedent. It might limit the center's ability to tie funds for established law-based schemes like SSS to adopting new executive policies. That would really strengthen state autonomy on these shared subjects.
But the flip side, if the court rules against Tamil Nadu, or finds a way to let the center continue linking funds like this.
Well, that could definitely embolden the center to use financial conditions more often to push its agenda. It might really shift the balance of power in center-state relations, especially on things like education, where both are supposed to have a role. The nature of cooperative federalism could change.
And it's about more than just money, isn't it? It's about who controls education policy, the direction of schooling, and those deeply sensitive issues like language, especially in a state like Tamil Nadu with such a strong identity. The court's decision is going to send ripples far beyond just this one dispute.
Absolutely. It touches on control, ideology, culture. Big stuff.
So wrapping up this deep dive, what we've got is this major policy and funding jam between Tamil Nadu and the center. Millions of students, teachers, staff are caught right in the middle, just waiting, while the Supreme Court is on vacation.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder, isn't it? All those headlines about political fights, legal strategies, they have real consequences for people, for essential services like education that governments are supposed to provide.
It really makes you think. This great Indian policy standoff, maybe instead of letting it drag through courts and bureaucratic delays, leaving kids in limbo, maybe, just maybe, the center and Tamil Nadu could, I don't know, sit down over some strong filter coffee and actually figure out a way forward, a way that doesn't make the students pay the price for adult disagreements.
That's a nice thought, because fundamentally, education is the foundation. It's the future. And when policy fights stop money from reaching schools, from reaching the kids who need it, it leaves us all with a pretty tough question, doesn't it? Who really gets to decide what's best for India's next generation? And should funding ever be the thing that stops that decision from happening? Definitely something to mull over.